All right, hello. I am Jonathan Troen. Welcome here. We are with Gabriel Halpern. It's pretty exciting. So he's been teaching here at our yoga studio, Austin Yoga Tree, all month long. If you're watching this much later, we're in the period of time where the coronavirus is going around. So we have shut down our yoga studio. We're doing some online classes, and something that Gabriel had wanted to do was this idea of having a satsang and bringing people together, asking questions. I mean, he's been teaching yoga, what is it, 50 years?
50 years.
50 years. So this is 50 years of practicing. And, when you practice that long, you internalize things that you just can't understand when you've been practicing for 10, even 20 years. He wants to share this knowledge. We were hoping to do it in front of a community. We don't have the community because hey, we've been shut down, so we thought we'd just pop on here and I'd ask some questions and I'd represent the community and just share with each other.
Well, first I want to say thank you so much for inviting me into your community. This has been such a warm, receptive place, and I don't just mean the weather for a snowbird like me that's trying to get away from the winter. Everybody's been so open, and
Yes.
It's a tribute to the community that you've created and the kind of people you attract to that community. So
It's pretty cool.
It's very, very cool. And he says it all the time. He's so lucky and thrilled that he's in this position to be the person through which these things happen. So don't think he doesn't acknowledge you. He does on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, we have an awesome community. I've been a part of other communities. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Well, also to take heart as part of this thing, because we're doing it online, because we're trying to reach out to people and minimize the amount of isolation or loneliness or lack of connection at a physical level that I know the actual space provides for people, which is another thing we always
Yes.
talk about. And so if this is another way that we can help to cut through some of the feelings of I'm alone and remind you we're all in this together, and we're going to continue our yoga practice even if it seems to be in virtual reality or however we have to do these online things. But you know that you're united with all other yoga communities, because that's how I feel about my yoga community, and I've been in many other communities that have that same love that you're professing for the people who are here. So know
Yeah.
that that's another solidarity all across the country. And if you want to continue, I'm Panglossian about this. It's all across the globe. And that's just a small part of the people who are working on themselves, just using yoga as the main way that we interface.
Yeah. So you and I spoke about it a little bit yesterday. But a lot of people come to our community and they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, sometimes 70s. Never practiced yoga before. I came following a surgery. I was kind of kicked into it in my 30s. But you started practicing really young. Not having had, many of us come after an injury or something forced us, or life is just so out of hand that it's the final thing that we go to. It's like we've tried everything else, we're going to yoga.
Sure.
But you got in much earlier. So what was your spark?
Well, I did get in much earlier, but one of the things was I also hurt my back when I was 15. So I carried an injury with me into football and lacrosse. I was still in the macho stage and didn't take one for the team, that kind of thing. And the training that athletes had in the mid-'60s was just nowhere near what athletes can do today to really condition themselves. But that being aside, I really didn't get into yoga till college, 1968. It was part of an acting class, but it was more like connected to sensitivity training. And they threw in Tai Chi exercises and acrobatics and then yoga, but we didn't know it was yoga. But it felt good because in those days I was a stoner. And, wake
It was the 60s.
Yeah, wake and bake philosophy. I never
Sure.
tried to hide the beauty of my hippie past, but it felt really good in the body. And then I moved to California in 1970. And so that's when I got involved in Kundalini Yoga as my first practice approach, and lived in a ashram, Yogi Bhajan ashram, one of the original 3HO ashrams. So that really got me on the path, so to speak, really helped me look at diet, personal responsibility for studying, and making the real shift, not just compartmentalizing your life and yoga is a part of it. No, it's your whole life understands the yoga ideal, and which means also surrounding yourself with community, people on the path, the satsang. So I started really when I was 22 in earnest, and haven't stopped since.
Why haven't you stopped? I asked because a lot of people. I
can't conquer
started
infinity.
and stopped. How did? Why? What kept you there? So many people start, stop. You never stopped. 22 years old.
Yeah, well, because the way I learned yoga, it was never about healing your body. I mean, if you could, early on you learn like, healing, not curing. There's just certain things that could happen to human beings along the path, and I happen to be one of them, where something happens irreversible to your body. No surgery will cure it or bring it back to where it was. Some illnesses affect you to a certain degree where you continue to function in your daily life, but it's a cost. There's something that is not happening that used to happen, or something that is happening now that never happened before, and you learn to adapt with it. But the quest of yoga for me is something that has nothing to do with whether or not you're ill or well. It's tools to help you discover a potential inside yourself. And once that fire gets lit, that people fall off the path, well, there's other karmic reasons you could say for why a person doesn't continue to do overt yogic practices. But one of the things I've always tried to do is to make people not guilt themselves for not actually doing the hatha yoga or the pranayama practices, although I highly recommend that you practice them, and it's to your own peril if you don't. But loving people for who they are, no matter what they are, and try to make them realize, you can choose to see your life as spiritual. It's like having a frame around a picture. You can put the frame around the picture, and the frame is a rat in a maze. And then you can put the frame around the picture that shows this is a pilgrimage to the holy center. The details are exactly the same, but look at how you're choosing to view what your life is. And so for me, I guess I would say, if I can use the word without offending anybody, yoga is synonymous with discovering the part of yourself that's living spirit. And I don't know if that ever ends just because you say you have a glimpse of it or a realization of it. I mean, you can't master infinity. So how deep does the realization go of what consciousness really is? I don't know.
So where have you connected? What does it mean to you? What's your living spirit?
All
part
you
that
need is love. Ya da 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 da. It's so simple that everybody wants to hear something more mystic than that. But if you could be love, perfect love casts out fear, says Jesus. So it's about love and serving people and feeling good and creating celebration. And then the flip side is handling the nightmare of history and the suffering that humanity shares in our commonality. And those two go together like heads and tails of the coin. And the spirit is the whole thing that merges it together. And life is what enables you to experience it at all. And I guess if you want to continue to experience it, you can, until such time as, this is the metaphor, you merge into the light. You're so willing to give up your whole self-separate existence to merge into the light. And they say that they find that that's the only life that there really is anyway. Everything else is just the illusion of separateness. But if you want that, you got free will and you can keep it. So, I'm still working it out because I like life, and I like the feeling of love, Can I tell a story?
Tell. Yes, we have time.
It's not Shabbos, but I like to tell the story anyway. So once there was a guy called the miser, Yosela, in this village in Poland. Everybody was poor except Yosela. But nobody could get a nickel out of the guy. He was such a skinflint. And then one day he was close to death, and the burial society went to him and they said, give us like 200 rubles and we'll bury you properly. He says, I'll give you 50 rubles. He says, Yosela, you can't take this with you. Please give it 200. We'll bury you. He says, no, I give you. If you don't give us 250, we're not going to bury you properly. Oh, you're threatening me? I did a lot of things myself. I'll bury myself. Well, so he was in an attitude. They were in an attitude. And neither one of them gave in. So he died, and they didn't bury him. And after 2 or 3 days, in the Jewish tradition, usually when a person dies, they entomb them pretty quickly. There's, and these are the old days also. There's no like embalming, and we can prepare for the shiva, no, that happened right away, bang, zoom, in the ground. So, but his neighbor had compassion on him, and after the 3rd day, out of compassion for Yosela's wife and kids, under the cover of dark, he took the body out, and he did a terrible sin. He buried him in the unmarked graves, which in the Jewish tradition, that's not right. I mean, it's a mitzvah to bury the dead properly. Nonetheless, he did. Anyway, that's how it went down. Now, the next Shabbos, the rabbi's waiting in his office, and there's a knock on the door. Come in. A little yid comes and says, Rebbe, I need 25 rubles for the week. I've been a poor water carrier. I haven't worked in years. Please, says, don't freak out. That's what we have the tzedakah, the charity thing for. Here's 25 rubles. Go. God bless you, Baruch Hashem. 10 minutes later, Rabbi, come in. What's wrong? I don't have any money for Shabbos. My kids are going to starve. Please, you got to give me something. Don't worry, I got it. So he gives them some money like that. And then like one by one, everybody in the village comes in. But it didn't have to be before the whole village came in. The rabbi was pretty smart. He already got the scene. So he asked one lead, says, let me ask you a question. Did you ever go to Yosel and ask him for money? He says, you bet I did. You know, one time it was so strange. I got to the door, I opened it up, and he wasn't this miser. He had this halo growing around him. He invited me in. He asked me my name. He wanted to know the name of my kids, how old they were, how much money I needed for Shabbos. We shared some cake, some tea. And I said, he's opening his heart. This is unbelievable. And then when I said, so you can give me some money? He changed his expression and went like a madman. He said, are you kidding me? You think I'm a miser because I give money? Get out of here before I throttle you. No wonder why people curse him in the street. Now the rabbi understood the whole thing. So he calls the community together. He says, we made a terrible sin. We've accused Yosela of being a miser. He wasn't a miser. He was a holy miser. He didn't want anybody to know. We got to fast from now till the next Shabbos and ask forgiveness. So the whole town fasts. Next Shabbos comes around, the rabbi, he's doing every Kabbalistic meditation he knows. He swoons away, and in the other world, he comes to meet Yosela. He says, oh, Yosela, I am so sorry. We didn't know. He says, I didn't want you to know. I only wanted the one who was the only one to know. Says, you're unbelievable. But let me ask you a question, Yosela. How were you able to do this by yourself all those years? I never did it by myself. Abraham was by my side. Sarah was by my side. Rebecca was by my side. David was by my side. All the holy patriarchs and matriarchs took every step with me. That's unbelievable. So tell me, are you in heaven? Yes, I'm in Gan Eden. Is it good? It's heaven. It's fantastic. But I have to tell you something, Rabbi. There's still something I miss. You're in heaven and there's something that you miss? Yes. What's that? It's the feeling I used to get when I used to put that envelope underneath the door of each person that said L'Kavod Shabbos, in honor of Shabbos. So, you know, we got to be generous to each other, even if it's anonymous and people don't even know. But it's really important to keep on giving.
And you said that a lot, and you quote B.K.'s anger in that. It's okay to receive, but you have to give more than you receive.
I always love that. You know, we were talking about running yoga businesses, and I was saying in the past that I had a very successful workshop at one of the conventions on how to run a yoga business, as if people don't understand that if you don't market it properly, you can't keep giving the gift to people. Because if you don't stay afloat, you know, unless you have somebody who's independently wealthy paying all the bills, right, then it's the community who's supporting it. So, you know, you always ask the master for like a simplification of issues that bend people out of shape, spirituality and money, you know. And we asked him, is it okay to charge? He says, it's always okay to charge. Just give more than you take. And if you've ever taken a class with him to realize the voluminous amount of information and technique that he gives out so freely, you see what he says. You know, you paid for classes in the Institute, but you got way more than just the money.
So talk, because people do have a lot of difficulty with that, spirituality and money. And I work with people on that too, this idea of you can have unconditional love, or at least work towards that. And it's okay to have things and have money and be able to share with people and share with yourself. So talk about the conflict and the resolution of spirituality and money.
Well, resolution, like anything else, I can't say I have the final answer about anything, but relative to the point you're saying, first thing I would suggest is if Reverend Ike asks you to send him $25 because the Lord told you he needs a jet, don't do it. Okay. So shy of that kind of hucksterism and stuff like that. I think it comes under what we call right livelihood. You know, that part of your job as yoga, if let's say it's within the yoga industry, right? Like you're making props or teaching classes or whatever it is that you're doing that has some technique connected to it that you think shouldn't be stained by the material plane, right? But where's your intention coming from? If you've studied like anybody would study a craft to be a mechanic or being an architect or something where you put in a lot of time, you've paid money, you've gone to schools, you've gotten certified like that, there's been rights of investiture that make you an authentic representative being able to do whatever it is that you claim to do, then in our culture, we don't do barter. You deserve right compensation for right livelihood. And especially since there's safeguards within the yoga tradition, like don't run guns, don't sell drugs, don't do sex slave trafficking.
See, we got cut off mid-sentence.
Not the first time I've ever gotten interrupted like
right? That. But you were just finishing up about spirituality and money and all that working together.
Yeah, I was also mentioning the idea that if people think that, you said your audience isn't always people who are practicing yoga. And one of the things I've tried to do is to make people realize the broader approach of what yoga is when you take it out of yogic language or take it out of Eastern philosophy and apply it to what makes it contemporarily relevant. So the first thing I was saying is that you don't have to practice yoga postures if you understand it's about fitness. It's about committing yourself to the joy of movement. Don't stop doing the things that you do before you practice yoga. A lot of people practice yoga and they give up everything else because it's really wonderful, but it's also time consuming, and it fits into these other life changes that are happening, where sometimes you think that the athletic part or the fitness part somehow misses that. But it doesn't have to. It's like having a great coach who teaches you life values as well as values for the technique that you're practicing. Then I mentioned that Jnana Yoga is the part of yoga that's supposed to hone your intellect and get you clear and calm and concentrated so that your insight penetrates into what good logic and good rhetoric is all about, as opposed to bogus fundamentalism and distorted thinking. So you have to be able to cut through that in order to be able to be clear enough to have an insight that's vast and not narrow. So many people have myopic insight. They don't know how to listen to other people's arguments. They don't know how to accept conflicting points of view and find a way to harmonize that. It's one of the major difficulties that people have had since compassion has been in exile in our culture for 50 years at least. And then there's the bhakti part of it. Well, you don't have to worship Krishna or find some other overtly religious formula to say, oh, I open my heart through this. Your family is the grace of God, as far as I'm concerned, given to you to show you how to open your heart with all the joys and also the sadnesses that you're heir to. I mean, we always used to say that parenting is like you're as happy as your most least depressed child. When you feel so much for another human being that their weal and woe is your weal and woe, you've made the breakthrough into like Buddha consciousness, where you share life's ups and downs with this other person. It's unmistakable. You don't need a guru or a priest or a rabbi to acknowledge the reality of that feeling. It's a common human experience. What's not spiritual about that? So I don't feel like you have to overtly, sing in a foreign country or do anybody else's ritual. If your heart is open to the people who you love, who are in your family and your community, that is the devotional experience. And then there's the karma yoga experience, which is not just skill and action in terms of performing your craft well. Think of any great athlete or musician or artist. They have to do the thing with a lot of practice and repetition till they get it down, and all of a sudden they become free to express another thing through themselves that came from the hard work that was required to get to that place, and now they leave that behind as something is flowing through them. But karma yoga also implies a life of service, a life of not being so involved in me. Remember George Harrison's song, I, Me, Mine? All through the day, I, Me, Mine, you're liable to step on one and it'll explode. So every teaching says, open your heart, serve other people, feel for people's compassion for people's plight, and celebrate. Enjoy the gifts of the Creator as much as you possibly can. When suffering isn't right in your face on your plate, find something to be grateful about. Look about you, appreciate the beauty of nature or open space. Or again, the beauty of intelligence is everybody's smart in a different way. So it's up to each one of us to find the ways to be grateful for having a body, the preciousness of human birth, as the Dalai Lama says, and just look outside. I mean, stay with nature. It communicates to you without having to say anything, and it's beautiful and marvelous and awesome, right? We share that thing you said about the Jewish tradition about awe versus fear.
We were talking the other day, and I was brought up Jewish, and the services are in Hebrew, so you don't know what they mean. You just go there, you say these words that don't mean anything. And one day, I started actually reading the English translation. Instead of just sitting there bored, I decided, well, let me read something here. And there were all these words about fearing God. And I said to my father, I was older at this point. I was in my 20s or 30s. And I said, I'm not really digging this whole thing about fearing God. And what's this infatuation with having to fear this? And because what we were talking about the other day was words and language, and the idea that these words really have meaning, but they can have different meanings. And what my father said to me, who does speak Hebrew, he lived in Israel, he speaks Hebrew, he says, the word is mistranslated, or at least it has alternate translations. And the better translation for that is awe. So it's not fear of God, it's awe of God. Now you can define God how you want. It's up there. I call it something in here, or even... To me, God is in all this space that surrounds us. It's this here, the connective tissue of air in between us. That's the essence of what I think of God. Different people have their different understandings, but even if it's up there, it's something not to fear, but something to go, wow. There's something bigger and greater than just this. Than me.
I get you. I think it's a wonderful twist on that word to help free your mind from the negative connotation of supposedly an all-loving God making you afraid in some way
Right.
as part of the deal. No, it seems like the love, I said before, casts out fear, right? So what could be other connotations of it? Well, it's unfortunate that we live in such a secular world where everything is so focused on the material plane, and science, empirical science, has destroyed so much of the things that were either superstitious and therefore definitely should be thrown out, but were thought to be supernatural because we found other and better ways of explaining what these things are relative to how our ancestors understood them. However, there are things to be understood about what we would call revelation cross-culturally that I would say is closer to the word of what we would say is holy. And there's a lot of things because of how people have trashed life and how we've trashed the planet. It's hard to understand the holiness or the sacredness that people might have viewed what the earth was like thousands of years ago in a state, if I can make this judgment, of more pristine purity with less human involvement in how we've, in a certain way, continuously used it or usurped our stewardship to really be selfish in our use of it, and how we've handled creatures and plants. But when you have revelation, if you read enough of these old texts, you realize it's like your hair stands there and something is happening. You called it something greater than yourself. You know, it's awesome. It's awesome to have that experience, even just a glimpse of it, let alone when you hear the mystics talk about living in that state. That would have to be such a paradigm shift where everything and everyone you saw would be radiating that, because in fact, if you saw it correctly, it is that. So that's how I kind of like spin awe, is like, the recovering of what's holy and sacred.
Yeah.
But again, in our day and age, you have to find that within what we think is the secular world. We can't look for it somewhere else. If you don't find, like in the Christian tradition, they have that phrase, God so loved the material world that he offered his only son. It's it's a symbol about sacrifice, that there's nothing inconsistent with the material plane with the grandeur of spirit when rightly understood and accessed. And that's what I think the Yoga Quest is about, freeing that. But I try to explain it in a way where you don't have to go outside of your own tradition or Eastern philosophy. You don't even have to have any tradition. The freedom is you can believe or think what you want, or throw it out ultimately, because they all fail short. They're all choices between mistakes ultimately.
But it fascinates me because you get to weave in the quotes from Jesus, the story of the rabbi, the yogic texts, and they all come off of your tongue as if that is your upbringing and that's all. If you just heard the one story, you think, well, that's your upbringing and those are the stories you tell. And then you weave in all these traditions. We're a society of separation. I'm this and you're that. So how do you get to bring them all together?
Yeah, to some extent you can. But listen, remember, we're a Baskin-Robbins culture, right? You don't want just chocolate and vanilla. You can walk in and you got all these 26 flavors. So that's what the humanity. And maybe I'll say this to broaden the idea that you're presenting. I am very, very happy to say that I went to the New York City public school system. Okay, and it's basically a liberal arts education. You understand the purpose of what they call the humanities. You didn't have a choice about whether or not you were going to have social studies, math, phys ed, geography, civics, foreign language, gym, art, woodworking, economics. You hated it like every other student. But you know what? When you graduated, you were ready to have an expanded mind. And now you go to college where you have these resources to study anything you want. That's the way I was brought up. So in a certain extent, society reflects that. Just look at your internet choices or on your phone. You can zoom in and zoom out. You can find any information you want. All of the history of humanity is available to us in a certain way. That's an expanded consciousness that recognizes variety, diversity. That's who we are, even though it will only be expressed, as Jung said, always by an individual carrier. So this is where you have to respect whatever your ethnicity is, whatever your culture is, and this is the coat of many colors. So I don't think it's unusual at all for people to have a very broad reach, even though, as I said, most of those things are secular. They're in this world. They're our history. But what's not spiritual about that? Only because the old language used to create this dualism between inner and outer, heaven and earth, right? Higher and lower.
Did you always hold this coat of many colors and this openness to everything, or was that learned along the way?
Definitely learned along the way. And again, I always admit, getting high was certainly one of the things. LSD absolutely confirmed it for me. But certainly before that, even then, rebel rock and roll. Sometimes you just got to shout rock and roll at your parents, right? And that was major for like breaking through certain middle class values and aligning with that the teenage angst and the idealism that wanted to see a better world. And like, you grow up realizing the adults are lying to you. They're trying to tell you that the emperor has no clothes on, and you see it plainly. That's devastating for a kid. So we all went through that generation. At least I feel the post World War II people saw that and rejected that. And then these things happened that were culturally bound and historically part of what we were all exposed to. The scare of the atomic war, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam. And after post World War II, it was really clear America was very heady. Without us, who knows what would have happened to the world. And since there was no war on our territory, we were in the best position, like the Swiss, to rebuild other people's places and get the economic benefit. And we rose as a world power. Just remember, it wasn't until after 1950 that the highway system was built by Eisenhower. So it was only like 50, 60 years ago that we finally connected all our own states. So look at what's happened. But that heady thing, then unfortunately we got so educated, we started looking at the shadow of the United States, and we saw what manifest destiny really was and how we became imperialists in a certain way. And the children of the middle class, they thought that the revolution would come from the proletariat. Marx was wrong. It came from the children of the bourgeois. And we couldn't handle what we discovered, even though our parents said, go get educated. Yeah, well, now we got educated. Now we're going to tell you what we discovered. You wanted us to learn. Right? And that precipitated for me the Vietnam resistance and all the other changes that then the flower power generation brought in, which I'm very proud of. But as I admitted to Jonathan, we didn't have our shit together to be able to organize. We were just off on our individual path, and that was the beginning. And now the young people who I love, and I always say I bless you a lot because you got a lot, take the torch on to the next level with more social activism and ecological awareness, do it better than we did it, and I'm thrilled that you're doing it, and I love you guys, and I want to support you as much as I can.
So you've been teaching for 50 years.
Yeah.
You sold your studio.
I did.
And we were talking about the other day how we, in life we accomplish a lot, but there's still time left. We're here. We're still alive, so there's time left. What do we do with it? So
yeah.
What's your to do? What's left on your to do?
Yeah,
you've done a lot. What's left on the to do?
Well, again, first of all, on a moment to moment basis, can I still feel like I'm relevant even though I'm not actually teaching as much as I used to? Can I still maintain contact with the people I care about, and to the extent that they believe we still have things to share with each other on a heart to heart, moment to moment level? I don't think that'll stop till the day I die. I also intend to keep practicing. I mean, it's not like there's anywhere to reach. It's like, if you're an artist, you're just creating. And if you're a yoga practitioner, it's hitting the mat just another day. There's nowhere to get to. I can say I'm beyond the ego's desire to gain anything. I mean, you love it. You love the practice just for the practice itself, and not necessarily that it's going to go anywhere. And, now that I'm older, I don't have any illusions about what new horizons my body, I'm not trying to do something further. I'm just trying to maintain. And that's one of my mantras. Maintenance is progress. If I don't fall less than what I'm doing right now, I'm doing a fantastic job. But the idea that I'm going to go back and do all those Cirque du Soleil poses or master the ones that I never practiced when I was 40 years younger, I've given that up. So to that extent, that's what I mean by I don't have any ambition to climb the yogic ladder, but to hone my own practice and to continue to commit myself to routine, and not be attached to the results of those things, which is what yoga says all the way along. Do the action, but don't get rid of the fruits.
Right.
That's
no
so I
attachment to results.
So just for the pure joy of doing it, and I still discover new things, so that's really good. I'm still trying to come up with some new internet presences and leave some kind of legacy of all these talks and all these affirmations and the positive thinking that I still think is really important to put out to the people in general, and also to continue to role model how I grow into what I would call my elder, which is whatever responsibility I feel to share life wisdom, like download my life wisdom into the hard drive of the planet, and still connect to as many young people and mentor them in whatever way I can to give them a blessing so they can move on ahead and be more empowered and clearer than I ever was. Nothing would give me greater pleasure than to see more and more people do better and further than whatever it is I did. So does that have an end? And and probably, be honest, this is end of life issues. There's an appropriate time when other people in the family are going to die off, and I want to be there to be able to be one of the people who goes through that family thing. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say it. My wife and I took the old time vow till death do you part, and we're going to hang in there till the end. We've already buried two of our parents, and probably means one of us is going to go before the other one's probably me because I'm older than her. And so I'd like to think that I'll have the guts to clarify end-of-life issues about what I want to do with my body and any of my possessions like that, and not put it off and just dump it into other people's hands when they don't deserve it. Like it would be like a suicide. Just leave it for other people to clean up, even if there might have been good reasons for people to take their own life. But I think that's up for me, is getting real about that as I get older, and hoping that could be another aspect of my own integrity. Can I face death in some kind of magnificent way, as my teacher says, live nobly, die majestically? I don't know, but it's, tell me something better to live for, and I'll try to do that.
Do you have a vision of what that end of life means for you? Like, do you picture anything, or is it?
You mean, can I not have any thoughts at the moment when you, listen, logically, I understand that when you die, it's another moment in your life. It's the moment of your death. Now, since everything up to then, I'm like Woody Allen, I don't mind dying, I just don't want to be there when it happens. Since everything up to then seems to be me trying to live as conscious as I can and be in every moment and not miss the moment I'm in, even though the idea of do I want to miss the moment I die? I don't know. It's kind of an interesting question. But if it's a choice between would I rather be conscious of it or not conscious of it, I'd probably want to be conscious of it. So in a certain way, there's a part of me that every time I'm alone and I'm by myself, I'm having this dialogue with, okay, I'm ready. It could happen at any moment. If I don't, take another breath and be really glad that you're alive, because it could happen at any moment. And I know it may sound morbid or whatever, but I don't know. Do I think about it? If I had to put thoughts in rather than saying I'd like to just be empty and see if I go into the white light, whatever that means. But if I had to put thoughts to it, yeah, I don't believe that life ends. I just think there's too wide a universe and other dimensions that aren't carbon-based that we could possibly have alter identities in. And I don't bank on it, but again, do I contemplate it? Yeah. Do I think it's likely? Well, there's some kind of continuity even on the earth plane where things, from garbage comes new flowers and stuff like that. So is there some kind of turnaround? Yes. How it happens? I don't know. Will it happen? It's not my job to decide. I have to, be as fully alive. Like we say, knowing you're going to die, how does that inform your life? So that's not going to change much. I'm going to try to meet sorrow whenever I can and heal the people who come to me. Notice I didn't say cure, but heal them, give them techniques to face what they have to face, and then be as joyous and loving as I possibly can when I don't have to deal with this stuff right in my face.
So you've obviously shared so many messages with the people you have been a teacher and a mentor to, thousands of them. Not everyone who's watching this has been one of those students. So if they're going to leave this with one thing to remember, that one piece, and I know there are thousands of them, so what's the one? But what do you want someone to leave this one going with, to take with them to change their life?
It's like asking, what's your favorite Beatles song? Okay. Well, first of all, if you're a practitioner, hit the mat. If you're not a practitioner, don't say anything about yourself that makes you sound weaker than you really are.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great visiting with you guys. If I never get a chance to come back, maybe we can meet continually virtually. Can I give a plug?
Plug.
Sure. Go to my website, GabrielHalpern.com. Subscribe to it. You get some free downloads, some podcasts, some one-liners, some bad jokes. The whole shtick, the Las Vegas act is totally there. A lot of affirmations that I'm just giving away freely. There's no sense in selling this stuff. It's free. It was given to me free, and you're getting it free. Just take advantage of it. And, of course, I'd love to hear from you in any kind of yoga chat that we could set up, because if there's any way I could continue to help people and keep it within the yoga field, so it's kind of self-selecting, I'll listen to any question you have, if it's about your personal life, whatever, but I won't answer like a psychotherapist. I'll answer like a yoga teacher would tell you, breathe this way, relax this way, read this thing, try this resource and stuff like that. So, I
might answer like the coach. If we do it together, I'll be the coach. I'll answer those, and he'll tell you to breathe, and I'll tell you what to change.
That works for me.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So much love for you. Thank you for doing this.
Take care. Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.